Welcome back to Daily Flash. I'm Andrea Jackson. The number of opioid-related deaths began rising in 1999 and has exploded in the past 5 years, to the point where overdoses are now the leading cause of death for those 18 to 45, with 1 million deaths projected in the next decade. Our next guest, Dr. Charles Lebaron, author of the book Greed to Do Good, has a first-person perspective on the opioid crisis, having spent more than 28 years at the CDC and as a physician prescribing opioids as well as receiving opioids himself. Dr. Barron, welcome to Daily Flash.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you say that the opioid war is self-inflicted and is really war upon ourselves. Give us some insight.
Well, I discovered that almost by accident as a patient rather than as a physician. I'd worked as an epidemic control specialist at CDC for 28 years. I'd prescribed opioids in the hot zone of Appalachia. I had worked in a federal penitentiary that was basically had to ultimately be evacuated because it became a center for drug trafficking. However, there's nothing like experiencing really severe pain and then receiving opioids to get an education on what opioids are about. And in my case, I had severe staph meningitis. I had collapsed vertebrae. And then I had disseminated shingles all at once, requiring antibiotics and opioids for pain control. The antibiotics saved my life. The opioids basically saved my mind. And after coming out of that experience, which required months of treatment, both with antibiotics and opioids, I came to the conclusion that I needed to look into the situation a little bit more. And I discovered the antibiotics were very easy to obtain to save the life. The opioids have been very difficult to obtain to save my mind. And the thing that I discovered is that actually it was my old agency, CDC, which had initiated controls over receipt of illicit opioids that actually had given rise, as best I could determine, to a epidemic of overdoses from illicit opioids. So this was shocking to me because obviously I'd worked for CDC for more than a quarter century, and to find that CDC seemed to be at the center of a amplification of a problem rather than the control of a problem, that made me want to investigate further and ultimately write a book about it.
So tell us about your near-death ordeal as a patient taking opioids.
Well, I had really severe pain that went on for months. And when you have collapsed vertebrae, when you have disseminated shingles, every moment seems like it's an eternity. And the only thing that would control that pain were opioids. But it became perfectly apparent as the time went on that there were enormous obstacles to getting adequate opioids. And those arose from guidelines which CDC had implemented, I think in a well-meaning sense, because
Sure.
there had been a prescription opioid problem. The effect, however, was to displace people who had legitimate reasons for getting opioids into the illicit market. And the illicit market is characterized by basically raw materials from China brought into Mexico, assembled into very dangerous versions of opioids, and then brought into the country in the false bottoms of trucks. And then there's an extremely effective illicit distribution network that basically became a substitute for the licit opioid distribution system, and basically has contributed to just an explosion of opioids overdoses, to the effect that after CDC put into effect its guidelines in 2017, there's been a doubling of the number of opioid overdoses.
Dr. Lebaron,
And
thank you so much for this information. The new book is called Greed to Do Good. It's available at Amazon.com. We appreciate you sharing your incredible story with us. More on that book on Amazon.com.